Hello, welcome to stream number 62 in this series where I'm programming an NES game live on stream on Twitch. And sorry for the slightly late start here, but I was testing out something. I thought I'd have enough time because I had about half an hour to try and get this to work. But boy, oh boy, technology never ceases to amaze. Pro tip, if you're trying to use the Skype app that's built into Windows 10, don't use it because it's terrible. And it doesn't even allow for basic things like allowing you to see a preview of yourself while you're doing a video call with someone. And if you ask Microsoft for help on it, based on the forums that I was kind of searching for other people who have clearly had this problem, Microsoft's recommendation is that you check your privacy settings to make sure that, access to your camera is allowed. Except the problem isn't that the other person on the other side can't see you. The problem is that you can't see the video that you're sending over, which is like, a standard day one feature that Skype has pretty much always had, I think. So that is why I'm late, and I apologize. Anyway, the reason I was doing that is, are my levels too high here? Or am I just speaking more loud than normal? I don't know. Anyway, the reason I was doing that was because I'm hoping to make some use of that in the future. Coming up Thursday, unless something changes, I will be having a guest here on stream who will talk to us about NES Homebrew from the community. I'm really excited to get him on. Again, I don't want to give too much details away, too many details away until I know for sure that he's definitely going to be able to be on stream and it all works out. But if it all works out, we'll get him on and we'll talk about programming the NES and his experiences releasing some games, and I hope to have several other people come on and talk to us about it from a technical perspective as much as possible, and find out why they program for the NES, what challenges they face when they program for the NES, what their experiences have been like, what they like about the community, what they don't like about the community, just kind of get some longer term experience in NES programming, because as some of you know, I only started this stream at the beginning of this year, or this series of streams in the beginning of the year, and really only started learning NES programming towards the end of last year. And so some of this is a learning process for me. Programming is not, but programming for the NES specifically has been. And it'll be good to get someone with a little bit more experience. And by a little bit more experience, I mean way more experience than I have. And I've got 3 people lined up over the course of the next month. I'm hoping to get some more if people like it. But yeah, and then also saw that someone shared one of my videos. I'm pretty sure it's video number 1 with the NES Maker community on Facebook, which I do check out every once in a while. It's interesting to see what people are doing. Some really talented artists working on that page and putting together some really great art for ideas that they have to use NES Maker. I've seen some of the games that people are making with it, and it's like any other maker tool that you look at, like RPG Maker and Game Maker, and you get out what you put in. So if you're looking to do sort of the minimal, just kind of take what they give you and piece it together with no coding, you can do that, and it works. And then it looks like you can. And I haven't played with this, so I'm just sort of going off of what I've seen people talk about. And then it looks like if you get more heavily invested in using the tool and learning programming for the NES, you can do a lot more with it. But, you know, cool to see the interest. People are really passionate about it, which is great. And cool to see someone share that video sort of unsolicited in there. And I think I've mentioned I've gotten a few questions from people from that community via the comments in the recordings on YouTube. Keep them coming. I don't mind answering any questions about programming in general and NES programming, so I'm happy to answer what I can, and glad that people are watching these videos and finding them useful. So last time when we left off, I said I would try and get the asset tool matching up the sprites and the objects so that when we got to the assembly code part here, we could create the map object without having to specifically hard code it like we were before. Now I didn't get a chance to do that, so we'll do that here in the asset tool and then see how that works here. One thing to keep in mind is we probably want to pass the parameter of the enemy type into this. So what I've been doing is, I think I've got some, it's param1, so just use param1 and then add map object. Call this add object loop, because now this is more generic, right? And instead of the type being hard-coded to this flyby here, we're going to load a param1, and that's going to be the type that we store in there. And maybe we can, let's do this. So we'll pass an X position in right now. This is loading, I believe this is loading the X position from the player. Yeah. So we'll do param2. The Y position is always the same because it's the top of the screen. So now we can pass it what X position we want. Now, oh, we can actually just directly store these here. This way we don't have to shuffle them around. All right, so that's that. Let me just make sure I didn't miss anything. Loop through all the entities, look for a spot that's open. Yep, okay, that's good. Oh, this one. Okay, so that was just the label that was missing. Excuse me. All right, so coming back to here, at this point, the only thing that's missing to make this work in a generic sort of approach is, let's open up the file system here. Come on. don't know why, but Windows 10 recently has been very slow to open up Explorer windows, and I don't know what the deal is with that. I mean, the C drive is a solid state drive that's pretty fast, so it should be more or less instantaneous, but who knows what the problem is. Maybe it's trying to access some sort of network resource that's taking a while. Projects shooter. Let's take a look at, we have this entities file, and so the entities file defines these entity types in this scope. Let's go take a look at how we are generating that. I think it's just based on the sprites. Let's see if it is a sprite. Okay. Now, have we generated our enemies yet? Yeah, so here's where we're generating the enemies. So basically, I mean, the easiest approach to this is actually kind of hilariously simple in a certain way, which is just we have the name. Let's see, the map object has, actually, we don't even want to do that. We can make it even easier than that. I was going to say we can loop right through again and find the items that are sprites, but we don't even need to do that, because at some point we're looping through those items and we are creating entries into this current file system. That's what this is here. And what we want to do is we want to update the GID to match the we want to match the current sprite index value, essentially. So here's what we can do. We can have an optional parameter. We'll call it sprite ID. And we'll make it null by default, because we don't need it for all of these calls. We just need it for the sprite calls. And let's see. So if it exists as a sprite, what we want to do is we want to change metatile GID is equal to sprite ID if it exists, if this is here, if sprite ID, and then, oops, right, and then and what we're doing is we're updating the sprite ID, the GID to be this new sprite ID, which we can then use and just write directly into the map data, and that should give us what we need to match up the flyby and its corresponding sprite information. So sprite ID, and not a pointer, sprite ID is 0. Alright, so here we're looping through the project and we're saying, okay, if this is a sprite reference, then see if it exists here, and if it does, we are going to add it to the current file list, and then similarly, oh, but that's not going to have a reference. Okay. Well, we still need to increment the, yeah, so we would increment this current sprite ID because these guys will take precedence over the map sprite objects, which are, you know, enemies or anything else we place on the object layer. So what did I call that? I called it sprite ID. So we'll just increment the sprite ID. And then when we get to here, it should be 4. Should be the value 4, and then that will change the GID of this. It's 3. Why is it 3? Oh, because it's 1 based index? Is that what the problem is? But yeah, it's a 1 based index. Okay. I forgot that, well, it's not 1 based index, but type 0 doesn't exist. It's no entity. So what we can do is start sprite ID at 1. Oops, I didn't mean to hit F10. Let's try that again. Start sprite ID at 1 because the first sprite is going to be sprite ID 1. So now we should have the right value. Sprite ID 4. And if I didn't mess this part up, we check to see if the sprite is there. So we set the GID to 4. All right, so this is only half of what needs to be done because there is the other part where we have something that we turn into a sprite. Actually, wait, do we? Yeah, so it would be the flyby is there, but it doesn't exist as a sprite yet. And so we would need to convert it and then see what that actually looks like. And what the GID would be for that. So let's get the assets here and export and put that back into here. Replace. So this still says flyby is 4. We'll build. And then what we should see is that when we run the ROM in Messen, if we go to that bit of the code, we should see that the value that gets loaded into A from the background data will be our value of 4 for the flyby. So let's test that. And that's the call I want. That's the actual subroutine. I want the call. I want to break on the call to the subroutine here. Okay, so let's start the game. And okay, so we've gotten to a point where we're going to spawn an enemy, and param2 is the X position of the flyby, and param1 is the value. Well, it's value 5 still. Oh, are we might be reloading the map. I think we're reloading the map and that's causing this problem. Okay. No problem. We'll just subtract 1. No. We will not just subtract 1 because although that will make it 4, obviously that's just nonsense. All right. So that actually didn't really help us, what I did, because although when we first load the map, we get the right value in the GID, we don't get the right value here later on for the map objects. So it looks like, let's see, how can we, I guess we have to, excuse me, I think I know what we can do. We can count. The IDs are just going to be the count of the sprites starting from 1. And then subsequently follow that. Is that right? If we get... I guess so, as long as the order doesn't get changed around by the code that loads it, it should be fine. So all we need to do, and then we can reuse this count we're doing here. So this gets done here. Let's do this. So we'll int un16 export sprite count is equal to 1, and then we just say export sprite count, right? Would that give us our, so 0 is skipped, so the first one would make it 2, and if we look at our project here, shooter.text, right? Or is it under assets? There it is. So there's our text file. So it'd be 1, 2, 3. The next one would be 4. Yes. Okay. So that's fine. So that's that. And then instead of this, we want, oh, I guess we need this to be an 8. Although I guess technically it doesn't really matter, but export sprite count and then export sprite count. I say it doesn't matter because we're only writing the 1 byte out. I mean, it does matter, but just not in this particular case. All right, so can we actually reuse this? I guess not, because, well, you know what we can do? Let's move this up. I don't think there's any dependency on... Why are we doing this in 2 separate steps? Let's move... That's going to be some refactoring. Let's leave that alone for now. All right, so we have that. We export it. Here's our export. Replace. Now we're going to build. This is all still looking correct. Go back to the folder. Let's open the debugger. Add map object. Want the call to that. Oh, that's already set. Good. Okay, so param 1 is, damn it, why is it still 5? Did I not reload the project? That's bizarre. Param 1. Why is this still writing out 5 for the map objects? Exported. Exported sprite count. Oh, it's export sprite count, not exported. Okay, so that's set to 5. Oh, yeah, because it's in the list at that point. Well, that's annoying. That's really annoying. Here I thought this was going to be easy. All right, so what we can do... I mean, what we could do is if there was some way to know that although this is a sprite, this is not... Oh, you know what we can do? Here we go. All right, so if we loop through, we see that there are, say, 10 sprites, and 5 of them are map objects, then we can subtract the map object count from the export sprite count to get the first ID that should be appropriate for the map sprites, because we are first going to export the sprites that are predefined in the project file, and then the rest of the sprites are all map sprites. So they're in a particular order which will allow us to sort of deterministically have the right ID by just doing that quick subtract. So I think this should work. Map object. Oh, because that's the total number of objects. Blah. That is not the number of object meta tiles. And it was such a good idea. Less than max meta tiles. I mean, same principle, it's just we're doing it in a loop, which makes it less efficient because we are not able to take advantage of just doing the math straight up. We could probably pre-calculate this, but there's a lot of stuff we could kind of revamp here to make this better. So if object meta tiles JD equals 0, then break. Okay, let's try now, shall we? There we go. So that gives us our oh, damn it. That's not going to work either. Well, it sort of will work. Not exactly the way I wanted it to. Okay. It's not as clean as I wanted it to be, but basically what I just realized is we can say, okay, well, we can wind back our exported sprite count. We don't know how many metatile objects, object metatiles we have in that list, so we want to basically go for as many as we can, where the GID isn't 0, and update the export sprite count. Really? Does that have... Yeah, but that would have the GID in it. So, wait a minute. If that has the GID in it, then that doesn't have any actual matchup. Oh, this is not working the way I wanted it to. That's the thing when you're kind of piecing this together. As you think through the problem, you realize where you've gone astray. So the problem is that this GID is the GID that's coming from here, and then there's the other GID, which is defined here, and that's the reference between the two of them, right? That's how they're linked up. That's if it were a database, it'd be the foreign key, right? The GID and the first GID. That's how you know that what the tile that this object or the tile set that object is using looks like, because you go look for it down here in the tile sets. The problem is that because I've loaded the data that way, there's really no correlation to the two things. The objects themselves have the GID of the item in the map definition, and then the tile set definition has the GID, and obviously you can match them. It's just kind of getting a little bit messy in terms of, like, now I've got to unwind this and then rebuild the appropriate GID with, or change the GID to use the appropriate export ID, but then I can't match the GID from the object meta tiles to the map objects because now the GID is changed. So there are a couple of things we can do. One is we could make the object reference this guy in some way. I don't want to duplicate the data. I also don't want to deal with having pointers referencing other objects if we can avoid it. Because you could say, okay, well, instead of having GID, we're going to actually reference the instance in this list, or the address of the instance in that list, and that's going to give us the real GID, and then we just need to update it here. But that can get messy as you do things like update lists, and if we were doing more dynamic allocations, it could lead to invalid pointers. So I'm not crazy about that idea. What I'd prefer to do is update this thing to match whatever this thing is going to end up being. Now, how we do that is sort of the question. So let's think about this. How... we can actually do so by doing this, we're removing the count from export sprite count to get the first GID that we need. But then I wonder if we need to wonder if I need to do something a little bit different and use the GID as the index into this, but then have a separate export ID. The idea being that then we can use the GID to do a constant time lookup into this instead of doing a bunch more loops. I mean, I think that would work. So what I'm saying is instead of well, that's kind of interesting. So then that would mean that well, you know, that we could do that. That would work. I mean, what we could do is make it so that we differentiate between map metatile and object metatiles in a way that allows them to exist in the same list, and then we have that list already populated. So like if I do is object like that, and then go back to load map and change it so that we're not, what is this? Load map. Instead of all of these parameters, now for the object metatiles, we can still have one buffer. And I know I'm undoing some of the work I just did a couple streams ago, but that's okay. What we're doing is we're going to do the lookup into this map objects GID, and then all we're really going to do is we're just going to set a boolean to say is object true, and remove that, and remove that, and remove that, and then remove that. And so now, instead of rearranging that whole list of map metatiles, we can just mark them as being an object with is object equals true. So let's look at that and make sure I didn't do that wrong. Oh, yeah, so this is no longer necessary. It's going to create some interesting additional changes. But you know, that's how it goes sometimes. Sometimes you build something and it seems like it's going to be fine, and then it turns out it's not fine, and you shouldn't be afraid to refactor or rewrite your code if it means it's going to be easier to understand or run better, or, I mean, you may not have the time because, you know, if you're working for somebody other than yourself, more than likely they want the code that you're working on to be done yesterday and not, you know, 3 weeks from today because, you know, a customer is waiting for it, or it's you're on a deadline, or whatever the case may be. But if you have the opportunity, you shouldn't be afraid to do it, because as you work on code, you understand it better. And sometimes by the time you're done, you realize that the problem that you were trying to solve could have been solved in a different way more easily. And you wouldn't have known that if you hadn't tried to actually implement it. I mean, maybe you did because you're an amazing programmer, but most of the programmers that I know, you know, they write something and then it's not unusual for you to have an insight about how you're doing it, and find out that your initial idea maybe wasn't the best one, and that you need to start over or change a major piece of what you did. And that's okay. Like that should be okay, because giving customers crap code And then having to deal with debugging that is way harder than taking a little bit of extra time to do it right the first time. And that doesn't mean sitting there and endlessly agonizing over it. Like I've done that before, and you spend tons of time trying to figure out what's the best way, and you sit there and you write no code because you're trying to figure out, like, how do I make this the best? And sometimes you're not going to get there because, again, without having actually tried to code it, you're not going to know. And you might not have enough information or experience to know what you're doing there. So yeah, so this looks like this worked. This object is set to true here. So what we can do now is when we load the map, we have this thing here where we're turning it into a file system item. We want to say if map metatiles.gid equals 0 and map metatiles I is object. We want to say it's not an object, right? Now that's the project files, and then here we're doing this list, but instead of doing this, we want to go back to map metatiles, and if the GID is equal to 0, or the map metatiles I dot is object. Oh, wait a minute. Reverse that condition. So if it's GID is 0 or it's an object, and in this case, if it's GID is 0 or it's not an object, do we need to do that separately like that anymore? You know, actually, we don't need to do that separately anymore. And the reason is because the reason it was a problem prior was because we had no way of knowing it's greater than 0, and we had no way of knowing if it were an object or not. So now we know it's an object, so we just skip it if we don't need it here, and that'll fix that problem, and then the sprite will get exported the way we need it to. We still haven't fixed the problem of the appropriate ID, but now we can, because what we can do is we can do what we were doing before, where we say, okay, here's our current export sprite count, where we've gone through and we're looking at all the sprites that are part of the project. And then, oh, you know what we can do now? Oh, this is perfect. No, sorry, can't do that there. I thought because we were looping through the current file list, I thought we were looping through the meta tiles and we could see if it was an object, but we can't. So, okay, so map meta tiles is equal to 0 or not map meta tiles J is object. So if it's oh, I keep reversing the condition. So basically we want to remove anything that we want to is that right? I don't know if we, you know, let's not do this. I take that back, because that isn't necessarily the right case to be checking for. Because there may be objects interspersed with non-objects, technically. So this is okay. Oh, okay, we got rid of the loop from before that was breaking out if that condition was set. So this is okay. So if the GID is greater than 0, meaning it's a valid GID and it's not an object, then we're going to write it here. That's good. Here we're taking it, okay, if it's a sprite, then we get the export sprite count, and then we're going to take anything. If the GID is 0, then break. If map metatiles j dot is object, then we want to continue because we want to skip over that because we just want to remove all the non-object metatiles. And then once we have that, that's the beginning of our IDs. And then I hate that we have to do this, but there's a lot to be optimized here with the sprite functionality. We can do that another time. But if we've got the map metatiles and it's not an object now, then continue, and then we're going to say map metatiles j let's say export ID is export sprite count, then plus export sprite count. And we don't have export ID set anywhere, so uint 8 export ID. What's the matter? It's just an int. There. Oh. Do I not? Fine. Okay. So that's our export sprite count. Let's make sure that this is looking good coming into here when we do the export, and then we can let it run. What's this? Stack around temp was corrupted. Sprite. Let's take a look at this. So we're calling map metatile to file system map metatiles. What's I? I is 5, which is not. Oh, did I remove the check condition? That's weird. If map metatiles i.gid equals 0, then break. Okay. All right, so we've got the flyby. Okay, cool. So we'll do the export, and so that is so why? Oh yeah, okay, because the flyby ID is going to change now because we rearranged the order in the project essentially. So let's make sure this is good. So J is 4. Export ID is this is the flyby. The GID is 5. The export ID is 0. Export sprite count is 1, and then we get increased, but we're basically done at that point. So now the last part of this is now the GID actually maps to an index in the map metatiles -1 metatiles j dot no map metatiles map objects GID -1, and it's -1 because Here we can even put a comment here so that we remember. This is GID -1 because the tile set index starts at 1, not 0. Right? If we look here, the first tile set is 1. So, we can even put an assert in here in case we've messed something up, where we say, okay, this should only be referencing something where isObject is true. And if it's false, we'll get an assertion failure here, which will catch a mistake, right? So we go through there, and let's go into that loop. And it's map objects J. The GID is 5. So map meta tiles of that -1 is the flyby, and the export ID is 1, which is now correct. As we'll see, oh, that was interesting. Why did it blank out all of that stuff? Export. Oh, maybe it was just a redraw issue. Weird. So now if we go back to the export and we go to this and we export and we replace this and we go back to here, you can see that the order changed, right? So flyby became 1, explode became 2, bullets became 3, and player became 4, which is fine because we're using those definitions. We're not using the constant numbers. Hopefully, I want to say that I was good about doing that. I might be wrong, but we'll find out pretty quickly. Like even in the drawing of the entities, we've referenced it by name and the entity scope, so that should be okay. So if we do the build, that worked, and we relaunch this, and we go back to the start. Okay. So param1 is the value 1, param2 is the position, which is correct. Let's see what happens. Okay, so other than the pallets being wrong, for the flybys, that actually appears to be working. Although, is the X position reversed? No, that's right. Oops, I blew up. So some of the pallets are wrong. It looks like they're offset incorrectly. Let's take a look at why that is. But that's cool because now we'll add tonight a different type of enemy. I don't know what it's going to be, but we'll add a different type of enemy, and we should be able to drop it onto the map. And as long as we have logic for how to process it, right now we have process flyby in here. We don't have processes for any other enemies, but if we add that, we should be able to introduce a new enemy type that will be part of the game. So let's figure out what's going on with the pallets. I think they're just out of order, and then once we're done with that, we can try adding that enemy type. That was pretty cool. So it's drawing the entities. Where are the entity palettes at? I wonder if I hard-coded that in some way. The map palettes. Let's take a look. So these are So that's if it's not an object. Oh, but you know what? Is it using A for something? Actually, it doesn't look like it. Okay, so let's take a look at so that .palette file. So let's see. So we have entities that we have this, which is the char. We have the metatile palettes. So that's pretty straightforward. I mean, the background looked right? I don't remember. I think the background was good. It was just the player sprites that were messed up. Yeah, the backgrounds look good. All the sprites are messed up. So let's see what did we do with those are the backgrounds. Sprite palettes. Okay, so the order of that is wrong. Where sprite palettes. So this is creating the file by looping through the list of... Okay, so this is doing it right at the beginning. Is sprite. I'm surprised that it's doing the flyby last now because... Oh, am I just not... Did I just not copy over the file for some reason? 10.5. Yeah, so that's... Let's go back. I must not have copied over the sprite palettes. Oh, that didn't get updated. Did I end the program before it got a chance to write those files out or something? Strange. Sprite palettes. They haven't been updated in a few days here. Oh, wait a minute. This is the problem. The problem is that it is exporting those files in the wrong location. So that's no good. So we need to move this. So we made the directory. We're loading the map. I thought we'd do a change directory somewhere here so that we didn't have to change everything else. Make dir, chdir. We do that over there, but we're not doing it. Maybe we're not doing it soon enough. Map file prefix. Get parent path map file prefix. All right, so let's do this. Map file prefix is that. Make the directory. Then change the directory. Then export the palettes. And there's other stuff too. We don't need to do that here. My guess is that probably what happened was I changed the directory there because that was the part of the code we were working on that I was testing and didn't realize there was more stuff that was being exported above. All right, so okay, so now all of that is being exported properly, it looks like. So let's grab that and replace it. and reload. Well, we gotta rebuild first, and then we can reload. Yes. And then do that, and that's looking, yeah, that's much better. Okay, cool. So now we've got that all working correctly. So that's awesome. Let's add a new enemy type. I don't know. Do I have that on here? I do have that on here. I'm not going to go for anything super crazy artistic. I just want to make another 8x8 sprite here, and just gotta sign back into this nonsense. Oh, come on. Boy, modern software is amazing. Didn't work 2 seconds ago, works fine now. Quality. Quality. All right. So let's make a new 8x8 little flyby number 2. So we're going to get super artistic here, right? Where are my color swatches? And this is an NES palette, so or close to the NES palette, so this should be simple enough. So let's, I don't know. Make little flying pound signs, I don't know, in different colors. Again, obviously I am not an artist. I am a musician and a programmer, but that's about the extent of my artistic skill. There. Beautiful. So let's let me just export this as a PNG. Okay, so we exported that. We don't need to save that. And then we're going to bring it into tiled as a new tile set. And it is an 8x8. And let's browse for it. And save that in here as flyby number 2. And it's super tiny, but that's okay. All right, so that's fine. Oh, where did it go? Recent files, flyby 2. Here it is. Okay, so we have that. place that on here? Oh, I need the select objects. Go to drag it on. Is it just too small? It doesn't know what to do. What am I missing here? Layer. I have this, right? Objects, enemies. Okay. What am I not doing right? Objects type editor. Show object names. Insert text, insert template, insert tile. Oh, there we go. All right, I was just using the wrong thing. There we go. So now we have our new, sorry about that. It's been a while since I messed around with that. I forgot how to do it. So let's export the map now. Let's see if we've totally gone sideways here. So far, so good. Everything is making sense. Let's reopen the tool here. What is the crash? I is 5. Map meta tiles I. Is that? It did not get the. Oh. Well, we should probably fix that now. So the problem is it did not create the flyby.json file when I exported stuff. So my assumption that there would always be the file there was obviously a problem. And we should, let's see, we should probably put something into yeah, so let's do this. If we'll say if the full path doesn't exist, then assert, we'll just do assert. Obviously you'd want something a little bit better for a commercial product where it should like let the user know what happened, but again, this is just kind of our tool here and we can fix that later. Okay, good. So now it through the assertion that the file does not exist. Oh, it's actually got garbage in it. Assert file exists full path. So replace. Really? We hit on some other problem, which is, I guess, isn't a bad thing to make sure we fix. Oh, okay. Weird. I'm not sure why it threw the assertion like that when we first did it, but that's okay. Oh, I closed tiled. Let's open that back up. And let's export this tile set now because I forgot to do that. So export as tile sets. And let's export the JSON version of that because that's what we need. Save. Okay. Now that assertion shouldn't get thrown. And when we go to export the project, we shouldn't have any problem. Okay, but let's take a look at what this looks like here. Oh, the colors. Okay, well, that'll be good for reference. So we say create sprite. There it is. I don't remember what colors we used, but oh, it just kind of just made it all black. So this is the problem with using Photoshop, is that it is not really well suited to generating such low-res files. No color, I should say. Assets, PNG, fly-by-2. So let's, what we need to do is, it should be indexed. Let's try that now. Okay, so that looks better because now it at least recognized that there were some different colors here, but they're still not right. And then we have this to contend with. That's weird. So I know that's more colors. That's okay. Mode. So what you got to do is you've got to export it. It's aggravating. So what you got to do is you got to export it as like a GIF, and then you tell it you only want it to have 4 colors, and then you reopen that and save that as a PNG. It's kind of a pain, but then it actually restricts the colors appropriately, is what I've found. So then, right, so we open yeah, that's not what I wanted you to do, Photoshop. Okay, so now back to this, and now if we export as a PNG, overwrite the original PNG. Let's see if this, yeah, so that's much happier now. Create sprite. Now hopefully, oh come on, really? It looks like we've got some work to do on how it is exporting this. Export. Let's try this. This is, I think, probably what I should have done. And again, don't worry about the fact that it's got the colors. It's got all of these in like weird places. I'm not super concerned about that. I just right now wanted to prove that we could add a different sprite, and we're finding problems, but that's okay because that was part of the reason that we tried this. All right, so let's save that. And then I'm going to just reopen it because the file list got messed up. And all right, so if we go back to the sprite, let's fly-by-2. Okay, so that looks good. So let's export the whole project. I don't know what that's all about. Let's go back to this. So let's move this into the shooter folder and replace all of that stuff that was there. And now if we go back to entities, now we have something called the flyby2. We have the appropriate char, we have the palettes. Okay, so let's see what else we've got. We should have another thing in draw entities for, we do have a thing to draw the flyby2. It's only a single tile, so that looks good. We have the meta tile palettes, we have the sprite palettes, so there's that. That looks good. That's all looking normal, so that's good. So if we build this, there's no problems. So now the only thing that we need to do is actually add the logic to process that type, because right now flyby2 is a new type that we don't have any logic for here, right, where we're actually going through a loop of entities in the game. So the simplest thing we can do right now is we can make it work just like a regular flyby, right? So we say if it's a flyby2, make it go to process flyby, but we'll be able to differentiate it here now. So I don't know how we'll do that, but maybe we'll make it move horizontally as well as vertically. So we load the game. Whoa, okay. That was not what I expected. I have no idea what just happened there. That was really bizarre. Why? We have two of the player sprites. Am I doing something? I'm not doing something like that. So why did it load two sets of sprites for the player? Interesting. Got the, I believe that's the right color set. So it's partially working. Something obviously went wrong with the way. Yeah, so that's basically, that's the right color set. The player sprite is off. The fact that it's adding additional, I wonder if I just messed up the assembly code here that I was changing here. So it should just be just that, like this. And then unless it's checking something about the type in, no, that's it. That's strange. Wonder if there's anything that I'm doing. It's for collisions. Oh, you know, check for collision. Check bullet collision. Well, that's the bullet. Process flyby is just incrementing the Y position and then checking to see if it needs to go away. Let's just see if we rebuilt that, if that fixes. Did I just mess up the assembly? No. Interesting. Let me do this. Let's if I just make it ignore flyby2. No, that's still having a problem where it's adding. Is it adding objects to the map? take a look. Let's see if the problem is it's adding objects to the map. I don't know why it would be so early on, but who knows? Something strange is obviously happening. Okay, so it's not until later on when we would expect it to happen. But what's interesting is it's adding new player objects that are colliding with the background and then exploding. Let's have these processed normally for a second. So entity 1 is still, it's like the fly-by-2s replaced fly-by-1 somehow. Let's see here. Let's make sure I copied and replaced everything. Yeah, I did. Okay. So now the sprite palettes are right, but for the most part, but we're getting these extra sort of spurious things. Is it... Let's take a look at the code where we're exporting the map objects. Let's make sure that that's looking correct. So that's a flyby. Oh, wait a minute. Why is the ID reversed? Because if we look at... Okay, so that's part of the reason. If you look at the entities here, flyby2 is number 2, but then we're seeing it as we're seeing regular flyby have the export ID of 2. So that's wrong. So let's go back and look at why that was. I mean, obviously I made a mistake, but why? What happened? So we took our export sprite count and we looped through, and the entity count, well, it should just be you know what, I think we're doing all of this for nothing, and I think it should just be starting at 1 every time. And the reason I think that is because it's always going to precede, in a situation like this, it's always going to precede any of the other sprites that we load for the project. So let's do this. There is, and this, I already know that this isn't going to work for when we're actively modifying a project and changing it around. because it's obvious that there's problems with that process adding things to the list that it shouldn't. But let's see if that fixes the order in which the items are generated in the asset tool. And then that might actually fix. Okay, so that's still the same. Let's go back to this code and just double check. I'm wondering if that'll fix the problem here that we're seeing. Oh, that's not where I want to break. I want to break here. Export ID is 1 and the GID is 5. Yeah. Okay. So just out of curiosity, I want to make sure that we don't spend too much time trying to figure out if that fixed what else is wrong, if that fixed the problem. I don't think it fully fixed it, but it definitely wasn't right. So let's reload that. We should start seeing things a little bit more correctly at least. Okay, so the flybys load. Okay, and they're the second set of the flyby 2. So that part's working right now. Why is it creating... Where is that sprite for the player coming from? That is bizarre. I guess I need to look at the entity memory. Add bullet. I should also look at what the... Well, that doesn't fully answer the question. Like the add object, add map object. We can see what kind of thing it's adding, but it still doesn't answer why we're getting those other additional entities, right? So here's our map object that we're adding. And param1 is 1, which is a flyby, and param2 is the X. Now it's a flyby 2. So is something being corrupted in the entities, or you know, it's possible. I don't know why that would be. I was going to say it's possible that it's something in the entity's memory that's getting corrupted and then causing this, but it would be odd that that would be the case, given that it's not like we ever use... What is the player's entity type? Player is 5. Am I doing something where I am incorrectly hard coding the player ID or the player type somewhere? Clear entities. Initialize. That's the player at position 0. And that should just stay consistently. So let's look at that for a second here. Entities is at address 97. So let's go to 97. And, well, if the player dies, then obviously that's not going to be where they are. Okay. emulation a little bit so I get a chance to actually look at what's going on here. So player hasn't spawned yet. Okay, so there's our player, and it's at 5. Why is there another entry? Let's see, so 1, 2, wait, 97. '97 is here, and the entity not finding it. Scope. Okay, let's find it here. Scope entity. So there is a byte for the X position and a byte for the Y position. Then this is the world position for those next 2 bytes. Then there's a velocity, a type. Okay, so that's that. So it's how many bytes in? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so it's 7 bytes in. So when we okay, so is there another entity now that has a type 5? How big is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9. 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Why that's not supposed to have anything in it? Why does it have stuff in it? Okay, so something you can see here, those updates are what's causing. Well, so actually no, those updates are the enemies on the map. So that actually raises an interesting question. If we were to remove all of these, would that create a problem? Would that have the same effect? So export as. The other question is it going to break? Will it break the tool because now there's no objects in it? Well, we'll see. It'll be a good thing to test. Still knows about the flybys, it looks like, but the obviously the map shouldn't have it in there anymore. So let's replace and rebuild. Flyby is already defined. What do you mean? Sprite palette ink. Sprite. Well, that flyby is sprite palettes dot ink. Why is it saying symbol flyby is already defined? I don't understand why that's. Oops, what's going on here? dot size is already defined. Something has gone awry in a bad way. All right, so these are that. That's that. Oh. Okay. Actually, that's not the worst thing in the world. So the problem is interesting. So the problem is that this map here, it knows about the tile sets, but we never use them as objects, and so it is still trying to export them now as background tiles, even though they were never used, and that's creating a weird conflict. So let's, because we're getting a little bit long here, let's just make this as a manual change. I don't think I actually needed to restart that, but better to just make sure so that we're not fighting something like a restart bug or something like that. All right, so replace that. And then obviously we got to fix that too, but where is this now? Flyby is undefined. 1287. And yeah, I know those are, go to 1287. What? Shooter.asm 1278. Just comment those out, right? And 1733. Comment this out and just skip that entity. Okay, now let's see if the game is behaving itself or if there's something else that's wrong. Okay, so it looks like the problem is directly related to the spawning of the objects, or at least the objects being in the map in some way. Because that's all still working as expected now. It was just when we took the flyby out, or we added them in, I should say, that we encountered this problem. So let's do that. Let's go to this and take that and add that. Wrong thing. Add a flyby 1 and a flyby 2. Add a couple. Well, you know what? Just add the one. Let's not go crazy. We're adding one of each. We're going to export to that. Let's make sure that that actually exported correctly. Okay, so we have the two objects. We now have, this will work fine now because of the fact that the objects are actually used. Let's export this. Go back to this and replace it. And let's undo our comments because those things are back. Okay. So that didn't have a problem anymore. Let's see. Okay, so as soon as we add them back, we see the weird random nonsense with the player coming up. we go to 97, which is where the player's ship exists in memory. Let's restart that. Let's see if we see any. We have those two flybys, but there does seem to be let's go back to this here, sprite viewer. This is going to be an interesting one to... It's so weird. Why is it adding the ship back? Is it something with the way that we're rendering the sprites? Something where we hard-coded something that's now come back to bite us. So this is our drawing routine, and this is... Let's see. This is looking at the type, and it says if it's flyby, not equal, go to fly, otherwise go to flyby. Compared to flyby 2, not equal, go to flyby 2. All of this looks correct. If we it's just populating the sprite memory. It's not like we have more than 64 of them at a time. I wonder if if I just take this out, are we going to see the same behavior? I expect that we would. Yeah, so it doesn't now ever add those objects in, but we're still seeing sort of random sprites show up. I don't even understand why it's showing the sprite. The player sprite more than once. So what just happened there? It was like we hit a row load and then it added the sprite for the player. But it's not in the entity map, because if it were in the entity list, then it would, I guess it would be controlled. Well, no, I guess that's only being... I think we may have to end here, and what we'll have to do for next time is, for those of you who prefer me doing the assembly coding, we will, I think, maybe work on... So Messen supports doing... writing some code in Lua, maybe other languages too, I don't remember, where you can debug in Lua as like an integration to the emulator. And the reason I want to do that is because I want to create some output in on the emulator screen or somewhere which tells us what the entities look like instead of me trying to count through memory. Because there's obviously something wrong with either the entity list or I don't even know, and I want to kind of try and narrow it down right now. And I don't know what the right way to do that is at the moment, because it's kind of it could be any number of things right now. The part that's good is, I mean, we have the flyby and we have this little flyby 2 now added, and that was controlled by adding it right onto the map. So we have that working. There are some bugs obviously still that need to be taken care of. Why don't I just write those into here I'm not sure where, probably in the export process here, just so when we come back to it. So to do maps with no objects on them, now still export all tile sets as background tile sets, even if never used by the map background. So that's a pretty big one, because that will create weird issues. The other thing is, what was the other thing? Oh, turning PNGs into sprites, and probably meta tiles when there's an existing file system item for that PNG, adds an extra unnecessary item to the list. So gotta fix that too. But as always, wow, this was a longer one. We'll come back to it again, like I said. Well, maybe not Thursday, maybe next week, depending on how things go. Hopefully we'll get the we'll have the special guest, like I said, on Thursday. I will confirm that on Thursday morning before the stream, and I will say who it is. And as always, thank you for watching, and feel free to reach out to me on Twitter at Clairvis, on Nintendo Age Discord, add a comment or question to the recording on YouTube, and you can always feel free to email me. I put my email address somewhere down in the bottom there underneath my my picture. And yeah, thanks for watching. Have a great night, and see you Thursday. All right, take care.